So let us see, okay, the first LOS. Okay, the first LOS is identify the interest rate and the policy tools which are available to the central bank. So if you see to the central bank, lots of policy tools are available wherein they can determine the interest rate in the economy and also the supply of the money in the economy, right? So okay, one of the policy tools that is available to the central bank is the interest rate. Okay, so please note that the central bank, it determines what is the interest rate in the economy. It is determined through a concept what we have is which is called as the discount rate. Okay, so what happens is the central bank, okay, it lends money to other banks. Okay, so whenever other banks they are in need of money, they will approach central bank and they would want to get money, right? Now if the central bank wants to reduce the money supply in the economy, what it would do is it would increase the interest rate, and it would say that it will require a higher interest rate for the money that it lends to these banks. Okay, naturally when the this interest rate becomes higher, these other banks they demand less of money, right? So what we say is when the interest rate becomes higher, the money supply decreases, right? So this is one way to control the money supply in the economy. Whenever central bank thinks that the supply of the money has increased, it would try to decrease the supply by increasing the interest rate, and this is what it is referred here as the discount rate. Okay, so discount rate is the rate at which the other banks they borrow from the central bank. A higher discount rate will decrease the will increase the cost. A higher discount rate would increase the cost of this commercial bank. As a result, money would supply would be decreased. Okay, one of the thing that we will have to understand over here is how the money supply is working. Okay, please note that it is a function of the interest rate. So let us try to understand the demand and supply of money. Okay, so what we have is, so suppose this is your two axes that we are drawing. Okay, this is the quantity of money supplied and this is the interest rate. Okay, now think about when the interest rate is 1%. Okay, and so so this is a lower interest rate. You would not want to deposit a lot of your money, right? So you would want to use that money because you will say that if I deposit in the bank I will get only 1%. It's rather than it's better that I utilize this money and I invest somewhere, I spend somewhere, right? So that this point of time you will say that okay, I will invest only $10 amount, even though you have a lot of money to invest, but at a lower rate you are not excited to invest. Okay, let's say if the interest rate is 5%, you say that okay, I have got some more money and you can, let's say, invest $50, right? So when the interest rate, let's say, has become 10%, you will say that okay, at this rate I will be investing maybe like $200, right? So what happens is you can draw a point for supply of money versus the interest rate, and you can have this kind of shape of the curve. So we call this as a supply, because as the interest rate rises, so supply is when the interest rate increases, the supply of money also increases. Okay, on the contrary, okay, people who would, the bank who wants to get your money, they are not interested in getting money when the interest rates are higher, but they would want to get money when the interest rates are lower. So what happens is when the interest rates are lower at 1%, they would demand a lot of money. So they, let's say they demand $200 of money, but when the interest rate is 10%, they demand only $10. So what you can do is you can create a this kind of structure, okay, this line which we will call as a demand of money. So what we say is as interest rate decreases, okay, the demand of money increases. So the demand will be as interest rate decreases, the demand increases, right? So this is your supply and demand, and this is the what we call as the equilibrium point where the demand and supply meet. So you will be getting, so what the equilibrium here is that the equilibrium rate is 5% and the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied, which is equal to $50. So this is called as the equilibrium interest rate, and this is equal to the equilibrium quantity, right? So the central bank would try to see how the supply of the money in the economy is, and it would try to tinker with the interest rate. So it can increase the interest rate, it can decrease the interest rate. The sole purpose is to monitor the money supply in the economy. So what we have seen till now is, okay, when it wants to decrease the money supply in the economy, it will increase the interest rate. So the money supply will get decreased if the interest rate is increased, and if it decreases the interest rate or discount rate, what will happen is banks will take more money from the central bank, and since banks are taking more money, they will supply this, they will give out loan. As a result, the money supply in the economy would increase, right? So the interest rate policy tools available to the central bank is, one is the discount rate, then there is one more which is called as a open market operation. Please note that the interest rate etc are changed only a few times a year. Okay, so a few times a year the meeting of the central bank is set up with all the board members, and there they decide whether to increase the rate or decrease the rate. However, one of the very important tools which the central bank has is the open market operation. In an open market operation, what the central bank does is it buy or sell the bond in the open market. So the bond is bought or sold by the bank in the open market. Think about if you have the central bank and there are like investors. Okay, so if the central bank sells the bond to the investor, it means that the investors are depositing the money with the central bank, right? So whenever the bond is sold, it means that the amount of money is sucked from the economy by the central bank. So what we say is, when in the open market operation the bond are sold, it means that the money supply decreases. Okay, so the money supply decreases whenever they sell the bond in the market. However, contrast this, when the central bank it buys the bond from the investor. So when it buys the bond from the investor, when you have bought the bond, that means you have to release the payments to them. So whenever a bond is bought, it means that money supply in the economy has increased, right? So this is the operation which the central bank does every day. So whenever it thinks that money supply has decreased and it would want to increase the money supply, it would buy the bond from the market, or if it want to decrease the money supply, it would sell the bond in the market. That is your open market operation. The third is the bank reserve requirement. Okay, now similar to your discount rates, what happens is, like, there are policy meeting. So there are policy meeting of the central bank, and so this in this policy meeting they decide on whether they have to increase the reserve or decrease the reserve. So first of all, we have to first understand what is this reserve. Okay, so if you know that Central Bank of India, it is called as Reserve Bank of India. Okay, so Reserve Bank of India. Okay, so reserve, and here reserve. The Central Bank of US is called as Federal Reserve. Okay, so wherever you see the central bank, there is a word reserve included. Okay, so that means that, okay, what is this reserve here for? Okay, please note that most of the banking system in the world, they work on a concept which is called as a fractional reserve system. Okay, so there is a fractional reserve system throughout the world. In a fractional reserve system, what happens is, okay, the bank, let's say a commercial bank XYZ, okay, if you go and deposit $100 in XYZ, okay, what will happen is, a part of your deposit, let's say a 10% of your deposit, okay, which is $10, okay, XYZ the bank, so XYZ bank, it has to deposit with the central bank. Okay, so it has to deposit a part of the money that you have deposited, and the rest amount, the 90% amount, it can lend out to the normal public. So it can loan out, right? So since a fraction, so this 10% is a fraction, okay, has to be kept with the central bank. This $10 is actually a reserve, right? So the reserve that you keep with the central bank, so that is why it is called as a fractional reserve system. Only a fraction is kept as a reserve, okay, and that's why you have Reserve Bank of India or Federal Reserve, right? Now think about, okay, why this is a policy tool. Okay, so suppose let's say the central bank want to decrease the money supply in the economy. So if it want to decrease the money supply in the economy, what it would do is it will say that I will increase the reserve requirement. Okay, so the increase, there is a slight increase in the reserve requirement, and it will say that instead of 10% I would want 15% as the reserve. Okay, so now think of the same XYZ bank. Okay, so you were depositing $100, okay, and this $100 now it is bifurcated into 15 and 85. 15 will go as a reserve to the central bank, and 85 will go as a loan. Okay, so what has happened is earlier the loan amount was 90, now the loan amount is 85. So it means that there is a decrease in the money supply in the economy. So this is also one of the tools available. Okay, and the last tool that is available with the bank, it is not a tool per se, but it is kind of persuasion that the bank would do to the commercial bank, and the central bankers will say to the commercial bank to decrease the lending or increase the lending. Okay, so depending on the conditions that are there in the market, right? So this completes your first LOS. The discount, the policy tools available are discount rate, okay, open market operation, bank reserve requirement, and persuasion, right?